Today on the CEO Barbecue, we're looking for gold in Newfoundland together with Galloper Gold. For a bullet point summary of this and all other CEO interviews, please go to resourcetalks.com and subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. The company you're about to hear from has paid us for the production of this interview, but this interview is still intended only for experienced speculators because this is venture capital and mining is a very risky industry where failure is the norm. All conversations are general and impersonal in nature, and they contain forward-looking statements. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and my business sells content-producing services, which also makes me biased. So before continuing on, please talk to an independent investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital is at risk, and also visit setterplus.ca where you'll find the company's official filings. If you're not 100% sure you understand all the biases and the disclaimers that I just showed you, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said herein. That all said, Galloper's flagship asset is in the CNGB, which is short for the Central Newfoundland Gold Belt. The main bet, or their flagship asset here, is called Galloper Island. It's a large claim package on an island inside a lake in western Newfoundland, about 24 kilometers southeast of Corner Brook. Galloper says they're targeting both structurally controlled orogenic gold as well as copper gold VMS systems across multiple target areas, with multiple gold showings, an 11-kilometer mineralized corridor concept, and separate copper targets that are mostly based on geophysics. Will any of that result in a new discovery, and when will they actually turn on the truth machine on these targets are going to be part of the questions later on. Galloper Island does host a small historic resource on it from 2012 already, which again, it's historic, so it's not up to current NI 43-101 standards, but the company that did it back then envisioned an open pit operation at a half a gram of gold cutoff with just shy of 3 million tons and average grades of around 1.6, 1.7 grams of gold per ton. As well as they envisioned an underground mine design as well at a 2-gram cutoff with about a 3-gram average at about 400,000 tons, both of which at the time, again, historic, but both of those were in the inferred category. Just very recently, Galloper has also announced that they'll be starting work to bring that MRE to modern NI 43-101 standards, so we'll be talking about that later on as well. Again, it's a large land package, so there's multiple prospects on top of all this, so definitely more to talk about later on. Now, for some of the numbers and more details, Galloper is listed as BOOM, so that's BOOM on the CSE in Canada, where the average 3-month volume is just about 90,000 units. The stock's 52-week high is 10 cents and its 52-week low is 2.5 cents. With 54 million shares outstanding and a $4.5 million market cap, today this is an 8.5 cent stock with a 50 and a 200-day moving average, both at about 7 cents. Notably, there are also 48.6 million warrants and 7.2 million options, bringing the number of fully diluted shares to 152.8 million, which could result in a 58% increase in shares outstanding and thus a 37% ownership dilution if the warrants and options get exercised, which is a big if and also something we'll touch upon later on in the conversation. Now, for this to become a conversation, though, I'm going to have to shut up already. And Haraj, I'll give you the word here. But first of all, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you, Antonio. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and the pleasure is all mine. I want to go over the basics here in a minute, but just before we get into it all, the most fundamental and arguably the most important question that I'm going to ask you here today on the barbecue: how do you like your steak?
I'm one of those guys who likes it well done.
Okay, that's probably the first time I'm hearing it, so now I'm considering just hanging up and being like, "Oh, my internet cut off." Jokes aside, though, we will do a deeper dive into the details on Galloper later on. But let's maybe actually set the stage here and talk about what the before we get into the beginning. Let's talk about the ending. What's the end goal for Galloper? Are you looking for a quick discovery and then a potential sale on the back of that? Or are you targeting a near term PEA? Do you have bigger plans for the company? What's going on?
Yeah, great question. We definitely have a strategic plan in place for the company that includes a short-term, mid-term, and long-term plan. I would venture to say the long-term plan definitely encompasses a at least one operating mine on Glover Island, because the potential the island has to offer definitely stipulates that there is a large opportunity to achieve that goal. Now, obviously, that's several years down the road. So, in the meantime, we do have an aggressive short and midterm plan that we've put together. That strategy will basically be implemented as of now. It has been implemented as of this morning. We put some news out that we are moving forward. Some of the work that we are going to do. So I would venture to say we are going to continue to explore, expand on the 43101 resource that exists there, target some of the other high grade areas that we have identified, and then take it forward.
That's a nice, succinct summary there. And we'll go into the details of what you're saying here in a minute. But since this is your first time on the barbecue, we'll have to take a step back and go through what I call the smell test, which is all about understanding the incentives and the track record of management. And I want to start off with yourself and your track record. Who are you? And have you made more money for shareholders than what you've spent during your career so far?
Thank you for that question. So I come from a mining background. For the last 20 years, I've been involved in mining globally. A big chunk of that part was with TSX listed Dundee Precious Metals, more recently known as DPM Metals. My foray into the mining world started with part-time and contract work with some companies such as Voisey's Bay Nickel Company, Vale and Falconbridge, and so on and so forth, and then eventually turned into a full-time commitment with DPM Metals. For 6 of those years, for the better part of 6 of those years, I was a general manager of one of their underground, narrow vein, very complex polymetallic gold mines in Armenia. So I oversaw that, 1,200 employees, great operation. We essentially took a Soviet era mine and turned it into a state-of-the-art asset, which eventually was sold in 2016. Galloper Gold is my first junior I have been engaged with. However, that materialized only after about 10, 11 months of due diligence on my part, including spending some time on Glover Island and looking at the mineralization, studying the history of the island, looking at the technical reports, meeting with government officials, talking to the geologists who discovered the island, and so on and so forth. So in short, I would venture to say that this is a new challenge that I have decided to undertake because of the potential it offers. It's a different world, vastly different world, being an executive in an established multi-billion dollar entity going to a microcap where you are trying to bring something to the forefront and bring value to the shareholders. Having said that, it's a challenge that I've decided to undertake because I believe Glover Island has the potential to be a multi-million ounce resource deposit.
What have those challenges been for you personally, again, for making that switch is exactly where I wanted to go, multi-billion dollars and operation, like an actual real business. And then you go into the juniors, which is more of a dream than anything else, at least in the early stages. So what have the biggest challenges been for you?
Yeah, the biggest challenge for me has been realistically working in an environment where you are generating revenue and you have the money to spend on things that you should be spending money on, and going to an environment where you don't have the money to spend on the things you should be spending money on. And the focus being, bringing shareholders in, new investors into the company and doing it in the right way. Um, the unfortunate situation is that with the structure that Galloper Gold was in when I took over, there was a change that needed to be made. And that change put us behind the eight ball a little bit. It took a little bit longer for us to be able to do what we have done right now, recently, basically in January, to raise the initial big funds that we need to take the project forward. So that's been the biggest challenge. You go from having an X amount of petty cash or, a spend or CapEx or OpEx on an annual basis to going where you have to ensure that you are counting every penny that is coming in, and you are double counting every penny that is going out.
That's the right answer actually, because it is so much of exploration success depends on how you finance it, and not only can you finance it, but how you finance it. And that's something you and I will talk about later on as well, Haraj. Do you currently hold any other positions, executive or board positions with other companies?
I do not, and that's intentionally. I did prior to joining Galloper. I was on the board of another company, and I held executive positions, insider positions. However, when I decided to take this position, I wanted to make sure it was a clean slate. I did not have anything else I was committed to because I understood what Galloper was going to require for me to get going, and the focus needed to be here 110%.
Mm-hmm. And that's where you want to keep it. And you don't plan on getting yourself involved in other names, or how do you see that?
Um, I think you never say no to the right opportunity where it will bring value to the shareholders of Galloper. So I'm never going to say no if it's an opportunity that supports what I'm doing with Galloper right now. However, the priority will always remain Galloper at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. I do want to know more about that, but people listening should also want to know more about Tara Hutton, who doesn't only make the invisible investable, but they've made this video free of YouTube ads by sponsoring it. Tara Hutton is built for the people who are tired of going through boring PowerPoint decks and geological jargon when they're analyzing mining companies. It's a digital platform where the data, the story, and the context sit together so mining investors can use visuals to understand the why without needing a geology degree or a week off work. And if you're on the company side, it's a great way to present your project like a serious operator with everything investors keep asking for in one place. Contact them at terrahutton.io. Moving on to incentives, which I believe skin in the game is the largest part of incentives. What percentage of the company is owned by management? How much of that is you personally?
I think right now with the most recent raise, we are, I think maybe about 16, 17% from insiders, if I'm not mistaken. And I would venture to say I am personally at about maybe 5%, 4.7%, give or take.
What's the average cost of of that 17% that's within the insider's hands?
Oh, it varies. I'm going to say average is going to be in the 11 to 12 cents per
Okay,
unit.
because really what I'm looking for here, not an exact number. What I'm looking for here is cheap paper. Is there any cheap paper that either went to insiders' hands? Is there anything within or outside of what management owns, either with the shell or whoever the company got started?
Yeah, listen, that's a great question. One of the first things I did when I took the company over was we identified the weaknesses that the company had. And any shell company that was founded, let's say, recently founded and was built on fundamentals that a shell works is going to have some weak areas to be looked at, such as how many shares were given out to founding members and family members. And, obviously those were for free. Let's call it for free, maybe in brackets, but we had to take a look at that and we had to ensure that we tried to alleviate the damage that could cause to the company. So we went through a very difficult time. And I think anybody who's been following our chart will notice that there was a difficult time for Galloper Gold in January and February of 2025. And that's the time basically we took to fix the company. We had to flesh out what was there on cheap paper where, people ended up selling for 2.5, 3 cents on the open market when our share price was, started at 11, 10 cents at the time, brought the share price down considerably, but we weathered that storm. And part of that process was cleaning it out and getting the shares in very, very strong hands. Right now, it's much, much clearer picture. Obviously, with the recent raise, we know that there is about 41 million warrants out there at 9 cents expiring in 3 years. We know exactly in whose hands those warrants are right now. So that gives us a great, great idea of what's going to happen with that. And previous to that, we only have about 7.2 million warrants out total. And I would venture to say 5 million of those are exercisable at 15 cents and about 1.7, 1.8 million are exercisable at 5 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And all those expire in April and July of this year. So it clears the company. It gives us a very clear perspective of where we are and where we're going to be in the near future.
So like if I gave you 5 phone calls, how much of the stock do you think you'll be able to locate within those 5 phone calls outside of outside of the 17% that's in management's hands?
Oh, right now it's actually, we have a very, very good idea. I would say 85, 90% of the outstanding shares right now, we know exactly where they are.
Oh, okay. And that's something you've placed since you joined the company?
Yeah. So prior to this most recent raise in January, the majority of the shares went into the hands of people that came in after I joined the company, high net worth individuals, family offices, from Toronto, Miami, Tampa, Florida, overseas, Frankfurt, Germany. Basically, people that I've worked with who know me, who are industry people, understood what the project could potentially offer. So they came in, bought those cheap shares on the open market, and these are long-term investors. They are in it for the long game. They realize that sure, you can penny flip and make a couple of dollars here and there on a micro cap. However, the real upside of a micro cap is if you have the right management, the right board, and the right strategy, it could potentially offer you 10, 50, 100 time return on what you are investing.
So, well, that is an important part as well. Who holds it? I'm writing something down about liquidity, which is something that I'll ask you about as well, because it could be a two-edged sword, if you will. We will talk about that later on. But just talking about insiders, I'm reminded: do you or any of the insiders personally own a royalty on the project?
No royalties on the project. The project is fully right now owned by Galloper Gold. So no
Okay.
royalties. It's just part of the units. That's all.
Okay.
Shareholders, basically.
Right. So not only are there no royalties within management, just at all, like it's clean from royalties entirely.
Absolutely. 100%.
Good. Another thing that we'll talk about when we get to talking about the financings. Well, and I think this about does it for the smell test. And typically when I'm done with that, I like better understanding the acid. But it'd be better to it'd be better to start with the history, I suppose, on Glover Island, where you see there hasn't been enough systematic exploration across your land package to actually kill the target, which is what we do in junior mining. But there has been some exploration, and again, even someone even did a resource on it almost 15 years ago now. So, talk to me about the exploration history of the asset, and most importantly, if what I'm really asking here, Harach, is if the asset is that good as you believe it is, why would someone drop it, and how did it find its way into your hands?
Yeah, another good question, really. So if we go back 13, 14 years, so in 2012, Mountain Lake, which was a small company, owned the rights to the property, part of the property at least anyway. They were able to raise some money and spend a considerable amount of money drilling 12,000 meters at the time on this plot of land. If you look at the map of Glover Island, there's this part called exempt mineral land, which is about 2,000 hectares of the total 12,000 hectares of mineral licenses that we hold. So they put 12,000 meters of drilling in that stamp-sized area. The unfortunate part was they ran out of money and they couldn't raise any more funds. And realistically, they literally had to relinquish and abandon the project. So they relinquished the land, they abandoned the project. And I say abandoned because when I visit Glover Island, you still see power generators, ATVs, even some canned food still in the camp from 2012 that was just left there. And, people
Was it any
bailed,
good?
so to speak. I didn't try it because it's not steak, but we'll see. Um, so, very interestingly, now, when I looked at the technical reports in the 43101, which was commissioned, by the way, in 2017, so 5 years after the drill program, the 43101 was commissioned, and it came up with a 178,800 ounce resource based on the 12,000 meters drilling. What is more important for me is not the number of ounces in that report, but the fact that it clearly identifies that the area that was drilled was stamp sized. The potential wasn't realized because they stopped drilling in mineralization, and they had to stop drilling in mineralization because they ran out of money. And rule number one in exploration is you never stop drilling in mineralization. So and the dollar figure used for the mineral resource estimate in 2017 was $1,210. So very, very outdated, that 43101 from 2017. So if we go and look back outside of that, there was literally no work done on Glover Island because one, nobody could raise the funds to go there. Two, nobody approached the government to get the rights to that exempt mineral land where that 43101 resource was. And three, I think the focus was probably on mainland. What a lot of people missed that Glover Island sits on the Bayvert fault line, which hosts 23 current and former gold and copper operating mines, right? All the way from north to south, it cuts right across Glover Island. So to their credit, the founders of Galloper Gold had a vision. They staked the land. They got the claims. They put the company together, and they started to spend a little bit of money on the island. There was some trenching done, some surface, some soil sampling, and the results were very, very positive, very, very appealing, so to speak. So they decided to take the company public in March of 2024. Galloper Gold went public, and then it commenced its first drill program right before, excuse me, I joined in late 2024. Drilled about 2,000 meters, about 6 kilometers north east of this historical resource. Very good grades, very similar grades to what the historical resource had. And the trenching work in between those areas clearly showed that there is a continuation of the mineralization from the historic zone to the current drill area, which was called Lucky Smoke. And then very, very interestingly, while all that work was being done, a 13-kilometer long copper anomaly was discovered, previously totally undiscovered, about 1.3 kilometers north of these two drill zones. So a potential VMS deposit there. So from a history to current, with the limited amount of work that has been done on the island, you can clearly see that there's a lot of potential. Potential requires money to be explored, and that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, it's another good summary, and we'll talk about what you see in the future for Glover as well. But Glover Island, I mean, this thing is on an island in a lake. What are the implications of that? That's kind of the first thing that caught my eye.
Yeah, we own an island. I mean, how many mining companies can say they own an island, right? So we have our own island, and we have some neighbors on the island, some black bears and some moose, but that's about it. So what makes it attractive is that nobody lives on this island. This is Crown land. We own all the permits on the island. Nobody else, whether individual or entity, has any claims on the island. So every single claim that is existing is held by Galloper Gold in good standing. The island itself is 178 square kilometers. Our licensed area is about 120 square kilometers, give or take. We have relinquished the rest of the land claims because we didn't see any potential at this point in time there. But based on what we hold and the 10-15% of it that we have explored, the potential is just enormous. And we haven't even touched the rest of it. So the island is very reachable by barge because the Grand Lake, which surrounds Glover Island, is not very big. So from mainland to the island is actually a very short barge ride. So that offers us a very, very big potential to be able to use the wharf on the island, which needs to be upgraded, and fix some of the historical gravel roads on the island. So we need to get a couple of graders there and get it worked out. In the short term, obviously, we also have the helicopter option. Now, that's a much more expensive option, but if you're not doing any drilling and you're just doing short-term work, obviously, helicopter makes a lot more sense. But for any major drill program, barge is there, wharf is there. What we have done is, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, we took part of 2025 and we went out to tender, and we got quotes from 7 different companies for camps, drilling, road building, anything and everything that their island will require to put in motion an aggressive drill program. So we took the time to put all that together, and now we have that ready basically. And all we have to do is, once we're ready, we press the button and we're good to go.
But bottom line, if I want to build a house on that island, I got to go through you.
You have to talk to me.
Well, we'll talk about that off mic. But let's talk about the future that you do see here for Glover Island, though, Harach, and maybe before you give me the plan, tell me what the target would be. Like, how big of a deposit are you chasing here? What will be doable realistically? What's the exploration target size?
Yeah, so The end goal is definitely, I want to see a mine on Glover Island. We are surrounded by mines. The Bayvert fault line holds multiple gold and copper mines. The Valentine, Valentine gold mine, currently Equinox, 7.9 million ounce discovery is only 50 kilometers south of us. So we are surrounded by mines, whether it's Firefly, Maritime, NFG, and so on and so forth. So I want to see a mine on Glover Island. That's the long-term goal. How we get there, we have a short-term, aggressive exploration program. I do want us to start drilling this year, which we will. We have an 11,000 meter drill program put together for this year. Whether we drill that much or not, I am not sure, but we definitely will drill this year. The idea is basically there is a good 5 to 6 year drill program. Every geologist I have spoken to who has worked on the island, um, has made the indication that the island hosts a resource of a multi-million ounce resource. That's basically the consensus amongst the geologists, including the founding geologists of Glover Island, who have done a lot of work on the island. And based on the little stamp-sized area that was drilled and the 178,000 ounces that they came up with, that's a clear indication that there is something special to be had there. It just needs a lot of work. Whether we get to a million ounce in a year or 2 million ounces in 5 years or 5 million ounces in, I don't know, 6 years or 7 years, that is yet to be said. It will be based on the success we have with the work we're going to implement. But I am fully convinced that the island hosts a multi-million ounce resource.
Mm-hmm. And I understand it's very early days, but if I handed you a blank check and the only condition was for you to write an amount on it that would come close to reality, what would you write on it? How much money would you need in order to get to, let's call it PEA stage? Because I think that's when you start de-risking the asset and when it starts getting interesting for potential buyers. But yeah, how much money would you need?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer because the way I look at it is, I can say I want to spend $10 million this year and I want to do X work. However, what if I can achieve X work with $6 million worth of work, $6 million worth of spending and not 10 million? I've still achieved the X number of work, but only with $6 million instead of 10. So I would never write a blank check. I would prefer to have a good strategic plan in place and supplement that with the requirements I would have on an annual basis. So if there's work to be done that's going to cost $100 million, but I can do that for $50 million, I'll use $50 million and save the rest of the money, but still get the work done. So that's how I want to approach this project.
But ballpark, because we were talking about, and we'll get to that as well, but we were talking about orogenic or VMS. Typically, where do you see that being? I mean, are we talking about something where you might have to raise 50 million bucks over 5 years? Is it something where 10 might be enough? What's kind of the ballpark there?
Yeah, I would venture to say, we'll have a very good idea after 2026, but I think, we're probably going to have to spend about $50 million on the island over the next 4 or 5 years to be able to bring it to a potentially, million and a half, maybe 2 million ounce resource, potentially. Again, that's a ballpark figure, so nobody should hold me to it. I think we'll know a lot more after we do the initial work this year.
Yeah, and that's happening over multiple seasons. Again, it is very forward-looking, and that's why we talk about that at the beginning. But I'll get to follow along, hopefully, as time goes on, and we'll have multiple conversations and goalposts do move over time. But let's maybe talk about the immediate plan there in that case for Glover Island. You said you're definitely going to be drilling now in 2026. When do you think you're going to be able to go out and drill? What's kind of the seasonality? I know there's not specific seasonality, but when's the best time to drill?
Yeah, so the advantage with Glover Island is we can actually drill on Glover Island 12 months a year. So there can also be winter drilling there. Having said that, ideally, obviously, you want to start drilling in Q2, lead into, maybe late Q1, but early Q2, lead into Q3, so to speak. At this point in time, there are a couple of priorities prior to starting the drilling. We just announced, obviously, the commencement of the work to do an updated 43-101 mineral resource estimate. So that's going to take several weeks for us to do. So I want to keep focus on that. We have engaged an external team to do that. However, internally, we are also doing the same exercise. We're going, because I want to be able to give the market something that's substantiated externally and internally. So we're going to do that exercise over the next few weeks. In the meantime, we're also looking at potentially doing some geophysics work on the island to identify some additional targets that are very, very attractive, but to firm up those targets that are between the historical Lunch Pond South Extension, what was known as the exempt mineral land, which hosts the 43101, and Lucky Smoke, where we drilled about a year and a half ago. So there's about a 6.5 kilometer area in between those targets. And again, we can clearly see mineralization at surface and some of the mineralization that looks to be continuous between the two areas. So those are some priorities that we will probably do over the next couple of months, maybe 3 months, give or take. And then I see that leading us into a drill program around that time.
What's the bare minimum of drilling you want to see this year then?
Tough to say, but I would say maybe 6,000 meters, bare minimum.
Okay. And that's going to be split between the different focuses. Then in that case, I think, because again, we talked about orogenic or a potential VMS. How are you going to split that percentage wise and what you'll be chasing?
Yeah, I would venture to say the majority of that would focus on the potential gold resource, because we know drilling was stopped in mineralization. So we need to do some confirmatory drilling there, probably re-drill some of those holes to see how deep that mineralization goes. And then also we need to expand that, because it's such a small stamp size area that was drilled. There's a lot of potential around it that hasn't been realized yet. So we definitely want to hit those targets. Having said that, we will also do some work in the other areas we've identified, whether it's on the copper anomaly or Lucky Smoke, where we drilled about a year and a half ago. As to how much of that, I'm going to say, once we hit the ground running, we'll empower our VP of exploration to make some decisions and then come back to us for approval with that.
Yeah, and again, I know we'll have conversations as time goes on. You're reminding me though, when you say your VP of exploration, how does one team look for both orogenic and VMS deposits though at the same time? I mean, they're really quite different, right? I mean, different geochem, different geophysics, different vectors, drill logic's different. So how does your team manage that without stretching too thin and delivering a good job and hopefully on both?
Yeah, that's why, I think it's important to prioritize the work that needs to be done to ensure, you have one A and one B. I will never call it A and B or one or two, because everything should be a priority, but priorities can have their own prioritizations, such as one A and one B. So I would venture to say that, see, this is where the team comes into play. You have to be able to rely on your team to be able to deliver. And for you to be able to do that, you have to put the right team in place. In our case, I firmly believe we have the right team in place based out of Newfoundland. So our VP of exploration is based out of St. John's. He's very well known around Newfoundland for the work he has done. He's also very, very familiar with Galloper Island. He's worked for us in the past as a contractor, so he's very familiar with that. And the team we have below him is very capable of delivering on both fronts. You have to empower them to be able to do the job. So for us, we'll provide the tools. They'll get the job done.
Mm-hmm. And well, I know again you'll be back for another talk sometime soon, and hopefully maybe we can get one of your geos, your VPFX, to jump on a call with us and walk us through some of the details on the rocks here as well, so that I can pretend to know what they're saying, which most of the time I don't, but I do a good job of pretending. But you're also planning on updating the historic LPSE resource now. What's that work gonna look like? Is it mostly desktop work? Do you have to re-drill something? What does that look like?
No re-drilling, but there will be work on the island. So the contractor, along with our team, will spend a little bit of time on Galloper Island. They'll look at the historical core that's on the island. They will revisit all the core that was tested to come up with the 43101. So some of that core is on mainland, and some of that core is still on the island. So I would venture to say this is probably a 6-week exercise, give or take 6 to 8 weeks, maybe. And I would venture to say about 10 days of that, give or take, will be on Galloper Island, Newfoundland, and then the rest of it will be desktop exercise. And we should be able to have something, maybe towards the end of March, early April.
Why do it now, though? I mean, it is there. It's historic. It's not. It's whatever it ends up being. I think it's fair to say it's not going to be a company maker. So why even do it?
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be a company maker because we're not going to go from 178,000 ounces to a million ounces right there. Having said that, because it is so outdated, because it was done in 2017, this is a new company now. It has nothing to do with the company that was at that time. We are starting fresh. So we want to know what we have, what we exactly have, and what are we building on. So I don't want to keep telling my investors that there's a historical 43-101 with 178,000 ounces on the island. I want to be able to tell them, here's what we have done. Here's exactly what we know what we have. And this is what we are basing our calculations upon for the exempt mineral land, the Lunch Pond South extension. Here are the results, both internally and externally. It creates a better, stronger foundation for us to build Galloper Gold on.
Is that also what your bigger investors telling you about where they want to see the company going or how they see it happening? Because again, at the beginning, you said five phone calls would help you locate most of the stock. What do they want? I mean, do they want a resource and then quickly go to a PEA? Yeah, what's kind of the feedback they're giving you?
At this point in time, we're not at that stage yet. Obviously, the major investors always want to have a say, and I'm always listening to people who are calling me and talking to me. Our largest shareholder right now is DPM Metals, formerly Dundee Precious Metals. I think it's at 9.6% of the company, and they are a great partner to have, great people to talk to, and obviously a great relationship there. A great resource to rely upon when needed as needed from a technical perspective. Having said that, we are not at the point where at this point in time anybody is dictating as to what work needs to be done. Here's what I take advantage of. Having been in the mining industry for over 20 years, I know a lot of people who are a lot smarter than I am in the mining industry, who have overseen $300, $400, $500 million worth of exploration work globally, whether it's in Canada or anywhere else in the world. They have done this multiple times over. They have taken junior microcap companies, turned them into $1 billion asset and sold it and made a lot of money for their shareholders. My advantage is that I have access to people like that who are reachable for me, whether it's a WhatsApp message, whether it's a phone call. I'll always bounce off ideas off of them, get some advice. They're never going to be an insider or a director, but they're always going to be there for me to call and get some good friendly advice from. So we'll call upon people like that, and we'll make sure we make the right decisions.
Hmm. What is that relationship with DPM? I mean, it's a huge company with traditionally a way different focus. Like, or would they be looking for expansion into Newfoundland, or like, yeah, well, what's that relationship there?
Yeah, I definitely can't comment on whether they would be looking for expansion on Newfoundland. However, the relationship is a fantastic one because um, obviously I know the team there. The current chief executive also used to be my boss at one point in time when I worked there, first as the COO of the company and then eventually the CEO. A large part of the executive team there are people who are still there from the time I worked there. And they're just a fantastic group of people who have had an enormous amount of success globally. If you look at what DPM has done, the success they've had over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, what a great model to look at as to how to build from a junior producer to a big mid-tier producer whose reputation basically supersedes everything at this point in time. So the relationship is great. It's fantastic. They are good people to call upon if needed, as needed, for advice here and there. And it doesn't hurt that Dr. Garkov sits on our board of directors, and I can get advice on him. Considering the exploration team at DPM Metals reports directly into Dr. Garkov.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting case study that I've been putting off for too long, but I'll have to dive deeper into DPM. Hopefully, go and visit some of their stuff in Bulgaria and whatnot. A topic for a different time, though, and probably a podcast in and of itself. You mentioned accessibility in the barge and everything on the island. How's is that's I suppose the only way in, or would you have to fly in? Is there any kind of airstrip for supplies or for putting in a camp? What does accessibility look like as a whole?
Yeah, no, it's just barge and helicopter, so no airstrip, so you can't land a little airplane there. But the helicopter is more than capable to fly everything in. So, for example, when the small drill program of 2,000 meters was done about a year and a half ago, the diamond drill rig was flown in by the helicopter and then assembled on the spot right there. So there's a lot of flexibility. when it's time to kind of put a camp together, and that would be for a larger drill program, obviously at least a 10,000 meter drill program, build a camp, whatever, you'd use the barge to get right to the island and then basically drive it up to the campsite, wherever, the campsite might be. The old camp is still there, but it requires a lot of work to bring it up to speed. It's just rotted away. So just probably cheaper to put some new mobile camps up there when the time is right. So I don't have any concerns with the accessibility of the island because it's so close to mainland. It's not one of those things where you're traveling, an hour or two or three to get to the island. It's literally a 20-minute helicopter ride. Or if you're from mainland with the barge, it's probably going to take you about 25, 30 minutes to get to the tip point of the island by barge from mainland.
How's topography after that? Is it pretty flat, or what does that look like?
It's a very interesting island. There are a lot of flat areas, but there are a lot of like I call them mountainous areas, right? Where you literally are climbing a mountain to get up there. So those are some of the areas that really needs exploring right now because it looks very, very attractive. It's just that we haven't gone there yet. So the island is very interesting. Lots of lush greens, 103, I believe, lakes and ponds on the island itself. So a lot of fresh water. Some of them very, very shallow. Some of them I would venture to say maybe are deeper. I've walked through some of them because while I was on the helicopter, I could see one of the moose taking a shower in one of those ponds. So I realized it was fairly shallow. So I went and walked into it. It was about chest deep. So the island gives you a very, very attractive topography, some very, very high areas and some very, very shallow land. So it's a very interesting trip. And when the time comes and you're out there, I think you'll get a good feel for it.
Hmm. And is there any kind of tourism, like fishing or anything else happening during the years? Anybody there?
No, I've seen a couple of hunters on the northern tip of the island. They have a couple of hunting shacks on the island there. They are locals, basically from mainland, who basically take their little boats, go to the island, and do some hunting. Now,
Hmm.
excuse me. The areas that they are on right now is considerably far away from where we are, so it doesn't bother us at all. So I don't have an issue with them continuing to do that. Plus, the areas that their huts are on, there are no claims there. Those are part of the claims that we have relinquished, as there is no mineralization in that part. So we're comfortable with that. We don't have any issues with that.
Hmm. I also thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what you just said, I might be wrong. One of the bigger challenges, at least for exploration on Glover Island, has been an overburden, at least in parts of the island. Is that a thing, or am I getting that wrong?
It's not a thing at all in the areas we are involved at this point in time. I can't comment on the areas we haven't even gone yet. I mean, again, this island is huge. It's 178 square kilometers. So there's a lot of areas we haven't even touched yet. But in the areas that we are working on, for example, the Lunch Pond South Extension area or Lucky Smoke area, it's not a problem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Um, Assays and turnaround. When do you think of the first assay results are going to come in?
Oh boy, I mean, listen, we got to start drilling first, right? So once we start drilling, the typical turnaround time for assay results is about 6 weeks from the time they go into the lab. So I would venture to say if we commence some drilling, let's say for argument's sake, early Q2, then we're looking at mid to late Q2 for assay results to start coming in.
I'm the kind of guy who likes turning on the barbecue before the steak is actually a steak and still a cow. So that's where that question is coming from. What would you consider success though in those assays, specifically from a grade and width perspective? What's kind of the cutoff for you to get excited? Do you want to see 10 meters of 10 grams? Is it what's kind of the profile there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been in mining for 20 years to understand that I don't get too excited with one meter intersection of 20 grams per ton, and I don't get too down with a point 0.5 for 30 meters and so on and so forth. So I would like to see consistency, and I think we will get that. Looking at the historical results and the 2024 drill results, we saw some areas where you got 4 or 5 grams over 13, 14 meters. One area I think we had 28.8 grams over several meters. I don't recall right now. So, and then you have like 1.1 grams over, 100 meters or whatever it might be. So I look for consistency. I look at the kind of differentiation, close to surface at depth, because it gives you a great idea of what you are looking at. So, are we going to have one big open pit here? Are we going to have an open pit and an underground potential? So on and so forth. So having said that, the goal would be make sure you identify the right targets to drill. Because if you do that, the likelihood is that you're going to get good results, and so it all starts at the surface, right? Make sure you identify the right targets to drill.
Yeah. And again, I've said it many times, but I know I'll follow along, and we'll have another chat once the assays are in. Is there any other important work happening between now and the assays? What kind of news release are you going to have in between?
Yeah, excuse me. There are some things going on behind the scenes that I can't really comment too much on. There is a little bit of interest in Galloper Island because of everything that we have just spoken about. So, there could be some good things happening. Once if they become definitive, obviously we'll put those out through news releases. Having said that, I do foresee that news is going to be continuous for us this year because we do have several milestones set that we feel that we are going to achieve throughout the next 6 to 8 months.
Right. Yeah. But any other like I don't know, geophysics, geochem, anything else that you might need, grab samples, and anything else kind of like from a geological perspective?
Yeah, I think once we're out there doing the doing the geophysics work, we're probably going to grab some samples and here and there and make sure that we get that out to the lab to see what we have. Never waste any trip to Galloper Island. For sure, get as much work in as possible. So as we do that, obviously we'll announce it through news releases and we'll put out the results. So for sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And some fishing too. Don't waste that time either.
Haven't tried that yet, but I definitely want to, as I do enjoy fishing.
You'd probably eat the fish well done anyway, so you might as well not eat it. No, but really, what I'm thinking about here, Harach, is a catalyst calendar. How do you keep the market engaged? I mean, it's not easy at this stage to get the market's attention. If you happen to get it, how are you going to keep them from a catalyst perspective and not going months without a news release?
Yeah, you definitely can't go months without a news release. You have to keep the market informed about all the things that you are doing. So, news release going out this morning, informing the market of what we are doing right now. Next step is informing the market of a potential something that could be happening that we are working on. News release after that is going to be announcing, the results of the updated 43-101. Another news release maybe after that announcing, or before that, maybe commencing the geophysics work, results of the geophysics work. Then that rolls right into drilling. So announcing the drill program, announcing the number of drill holes. So we'll keep them engaged. I'm one of those guys who doesn't want to put out fluff news. I don't want to be putting out news just because I have to put out news. I want there to be substance to it because I want to deliver results. So my position on that is very simple. We have a good plan. I have explained our plan to every single investor I have met with, and every single investor who is willing to call me and talk to me, I will explain it to them again, and I'll go through it. I don't have a problem with that. But the one thing I will say is that expect material news from us. Don't look for fluff news that's not going to do anything.
Yeah, fair point. And again, it's not easy to communicate with the market at this stage, if it ever is. So we'll definitely talk about that as well. But might as well talk about money before that. When all the work is said and done, and you're actually at the point where you're going to have to drill, do you have enough money to start drilling and raise on the back of news, or are you going to have to raise before that?
Yeah. So, excuse me, another good question. Right now, we just obviously finished our raise. So we announced a $1.5 million raise on January 13th. Enormous interest in the project. We ended up upsizing it to $2.5 million. We closed in 3 weeks on $2.5 million, and we turned away about $1 million at the end also. We just couldn't take any more money just because, we're a micro cap company. So we couldn't raise $3.5 million at where we are today. So, right now we have $2.5 million in the bank. Well, a little less than that after paying some fees and whatnot. So we definitely, obviously, commenced the 43-101 work. So we'll spend some money on that. I don't intend on spending a lot of this cash on drilling. because I don't see us raising another, excuse me, doing another hard raise for the rest of this year. I don't want to go back to the market for hard cash for G&A and marketing for the rest of the year. I do see us doing some work with the money that we have. I do see us getting to a position where we are much stronger from a market cap perspective, where we potentially can bring in some flow through funds for the drill program, along with, as I mentioned, something substantial that we are working on behind the scenes that we are not ready to discuss at this point in time. And I would venture to say that's going to be sufficient to see us through until the end of the year and early 2026, 2027. Also considering that we have a considerable amount of warrants outstanding that could be exercised once they're in the money, which would bring a substantial amount of cash to the company.
Do you see yourself going through that exercise? Oh, well, actually, it might be worth talking about because you said flow through, not charity flow through. Is that what, do you want to go for flow through or charity flow through?
Um, I'm not. I don't have a definitive answer to that at this point in time. Whichever offers me the best deal that will bring the best value, we can go in that direction. I have spoken to several people who are, both pitching flow through and charity flow through. So we'll have to see what makes the most sense when the time is right. I can't make the decision right now. It's just too early.
Mm-hmm. Um, well, yeah, I was just thinking about what do you call it? Critical metals flow through premium, and whether you can apply for that because you will be looking for copper, and what will the premium be on those shares?
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point in time. I do have the team looking into that. So that is something that the team is looking into. From a premiums perspective, I don't know. I have seen anywhere from 20 to 40% premium, obviously, give or take. So it's all going to depend on what's available at the time.
Right. Yeah. That's fair. Do you see yourself going through that exercise until you come to kind of a value inflection of sorts, or like an inflection point, or be it a discovery hole or something else, or would you be looking to JV the project before that?
Uh, Tough question. You never want to give the farm away. So, anything that's not going to make sense for our shareholders, we're not going to do it. Having said that, JV is always attractive if it brings in the right partner, the right amount of money to take the project forward. It all depends on what that JV looks like, what the benefits are for each party, and what the end results could look like for both parties involved. So, I'm always open to discussion. I'm very, very happy to hear. I've had calls, people have called me and said, for X amount of dollars, how much of the company are you willing to give up? And the answer is always the same. I'm not willing to give up anything, but for X amount of dollars, we can talk about, the potential earning that we can see. So there are always things that you have to look at and ensure that the decision that is made is the right one for the organization. So, would I entertain a JV down the road? Sure. It has to make sense. It definitely has to make sense. Until then, I think we can be self-sufficient and or, potentially work with a partner with a right to earn in down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always an interesting balance there. You don't want to give out project level financings too early and too much, but then at the same time, you don't want to do too much dilution either. But am I getting it correctly? You're thinking no more hard dollar financings in 2026. If you do end up doing something, it would be a flow through money that's going to go into the ground.
Correct. 100%.
Yeah, because again, in you're up to 150 something million shares there with the warrants, so fully diluted is what I'm talking about. You've worked with partner companies before, though. What's that experience telling you about who a potential partner might be in the future, albeit eventually? And I understand it might not be the immediate goal, but maybe eventually a JV partner, or even further down the road, a buyer, potential buyer. Who does this thing work with? Who's looking around? You mentioned Firefly, although they're more of a developer. So yeah, talk to me about that.
Well, I think you're always going to become a target once you start making progress. Right now you're definitely not a big target for anybody, but once you start making progress, you're definitely a target for a mid-tier operator and or a developer. Because the way mid-tiers or developers work is that once they have one project and second and third, and the first one is running, let's say, out of life of mine, they are looking to supplement that with the new third or fourth or fifth asset. And you automatically become one of their targets because you have something of substance. For us to get to that point, I would venture to say we need about 1,000,000 ounces, and that then they start taking you seriously. I've had several CEOs in Toronto approach me and said, happy to talk to you once you have 1,000,000 ounces. And I'm like, well, you're going to be chasing me once I have 1,000,000 ounces. I'm very happy you're coming to me and saying, happy to talk to you once you have 1,000,000 ounces. But if I can come up with 1,000,000 ounces, I think my options are going to be a lot bigger, are going to have a lot bigger potential. So, until then, I think what we do is we take it slow. We keep our ears open. We make sure we continue to engage with anybody and everybody who might be interested. Newfoundland is not going anywhere. It's only going up from an investment perspective. Top ranked mining jurisdiction, top tier potential asset, right on the Bayvert fault line, connected to all these other operating assets there. So we do have some flexibility with that. I would venture to say eventually someone's going to come to us and say, you are worth X, we will pay you XX, and we want the asset. That's how generally it is. My position always is very simple. Looking down the road, very down the road, do you really want to be a single asset operator? I personally am against that. I never want to be a single asset operator because you've put all your eggs in one basket and the risk is just too big. And I don't want to name any names, but we have seen some recent examples where you could have a great mine, a great asset, great operator, and something goes sideways and you're gone. You're bankrupt. You're totally out. Mm-hmm. Whereas an operator, mid-tier operator, or a larger company who has multiple assets is willing to pay you XX for X because they see the potential. Their risk is much less than yours. So, you look at that and say, okay, the asset is worth X dollars. You're willing to pay me XX. Take it to the shareholders and, away we go. So I think we'll keep our ears and eyes open for the next little while and make sure that whoever tries to come in and partner with us is the right person who's going to do this the right way. And they're not just doing it for short-term gain.
Going back to money here, there's a note that I made before. How much money are you budgeting for those non-exploration expenses? Call it G&A or just everything that's not drilling and exploration, the hard dollars that you have right now. How much of that are you going to spend this year?
I would venture to say $1.5 million for G&A and marketing for the next 12 months, give or take. I could be off by $100,000 here and there. It all depends. Generally speaking, the way I like to see it is 70 cents on every dollar goes into the ground and 30 cents goes to G&A and marketing. Having said that, I do realize that we are very early stage. We are undervalued from a market cap perspective. I mean, listen, the comparatives we've looked at, and we just recently completed a study, we are trading at $20 per ounce of gold we have in the ground. The closest junior comparable that we have is trading at $90 per ounce of gold they have in the ground. And the average is about $150, give or take. So if we take the lower end with 178,000 ounces, we should be at 15, 16, $17 million market cap right now. And people ask me, well, why are you at 4.5 million? And the answer is simple. Nobody knows about us. I didn't know about us until I joined Galloper Gold. I had no idea who Galloper Gold was. So why would I be surprised that people don't know about us? So what that tells me is that we need to spend some money on marketing to get the word out. But when I say marketing, that also includes bringing in people to buy your shares on the open market. That's part of marketing, right? What's the return on investment? So that's why I say I might be off by 100,000 here, give or take. But the goal is about $1.5 million over the next 10 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit more about that marketing, because I can see you've cleaned up the website and everything, and you seem to be willing to do promotion. You said you don't want to do fluff news releases, which sometimes do get used as promotion. But what exactly are you going to do in terms of marketing to, again, stay relevant in what seems like a fairly crowded market without, again, the most important part here is without turning the company into a promotion treadmill, if you will?
Yeah, that's where that leads to failure. So I've seen that before where you pump your company without essence to it, and then it leads to failure and shareholders losing money. We don't want to do that. We want to give substance to it, and that's one of the reasons we're doing the updated 43-101 right now, because we want to have a good foundation to build the company upon. Immediately after, actually, as of tomorrow, I will be in downtown Toronto and we commence our marketing program where I am meeting several parties over the next week who will provide us support, potential support, whether it's social media marketing, whether excuse me, whether it's bringing in investors, getting the story out, setting up meetings. Up until November, when I started to hit Bay Street and started to meet with some of the institutions, nobody knew about us. Nobody even Galloper Gold. What is that? And then everybody was surprised that the Galloper Gold had 178,000 ounces and it was at $4 million market cap. So just this week, we will start hitting the street again. So some social media stuff, a lot more one-on-one meetings with family offices, individuals, investors, brokers, and basically getting the word out. You know, obviously I do PDAC every year, but this year, you know, we'll target Beaver Creek. So we will try to get out there. We will probably be in Vancouver for January next year. We might do something at CIM or MRR this year from a booth perspective. So we'll start getting the word out without draining the company, but we'll spend the dollars where we need to spend to bring a lot more eyes to Galloper Gold. If I'm going to spend $10, I'd like to spend nine of those dollars on people who will buy our share on the open market, and $1 of that $10 on social media marketing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good approach. It's interesting how you're thinking about it. I think not a lot of people do think about it that way. What do you think? I mean, I've tried to kind of look for potential risks and challenges here. What do you think are the biggest risks for the company right now?
Well, I mean, the risk is, I would venture to say the risk is always there for a junior mismanagement. So, you know, I'm accountable at the end of the day. My board and myself are accountable for what's going to happen. So the biggest risk is always human failure. And people are very afraid to admit that. They are very worried saying that I made a mistake. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to make a mistake. That's why I've put a world-class board of directors together to ensure that we are guided in the right direction. You know, Dr. Ilya Garkov, Mr. Stephen Shea, former managing partner at E&Y out of Toronto, Mr. Soren Sarkisov, a world-renowned entrepreneur, businesses in, you know, globally in various parts of the world, a very high net worth individual. So we've put a board together that can guide us in taking this. So the first risk is always the human factor, and we've eliminated that part, or at least we've tried to eliminate it. We made sure that we have the right people in the right roles from a board and management perspective. Mm-hmm. You always have the risk of, finances. So we do have this great plan in place right now, but what if we are not able to do XX to get to XXX? So we have to mitigate that. To mitigate that, you have to have a plan B. We definitely have a plan B, and we are working on that right now. We can't talk about it publicly because it does involve other people, you know, and we cannot discuss that at this point in time. And then, of course, you always have the risk of, what happens where you do start drilling and something goes sideways, whether it's weather related, whether it's human error related. So you try to mitigate that as best as possible, but there are some various components that are out of your control, right? But whatever is within our control, I firmly believe we have mitigated. So we see a great opportunity to take this from a micro cap to a real junior in the next 12 months, where then we can start garnering the attention of institutions. You know, you need to have a market cap that's in the 20, 25, 30 million range to have any institution start looking at you. And that's the goal. For this year, the goal is for us to be able to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. How is the weather on the island? How is it different from mainland Newfoundland?
Very similar to mainland Newfoundland. The cold and the snow is pretty much the same. The only thing is, fog. You get fog that comes through the island over the lake, over Grand Lake, obviously. So that does cause some delays sometimes with helicopter flights, but it's short term. It's a passing fog, so it could be a 24-hour delay and then you're good to go. But we haven't really had any major issues with that, but it is something that's out there.
What about permitting and just overall though, because Glover Island is under a unique permitting process as a public reserve, as far as I understand it. Does that add any permitting risk or timeline risk for you, or yeah, what does that really look like?
We have a fantastic relationship with the government of Newfoundland, and I should mention that the government has been extremely good to work with, very open, very receptive, and they literally want to see every single investor in Newfoundland succeed because they do realize that the potential that Newfoundland has from a mining perspective. In specific to Glover Island, because Dr. James Conliffe, who's the foremost expert for mineralization and geology for Newfoundland, works for the government of Newfoundland, has done a detailed study on Glover Island, and he fully supports the way we see what we see on Glover Island. So he's fully convinced that there's a huge potential for that. We see a lot of support from the government. We have not had any issues with the drill or environmental permits. The timelines are very clear. The process is very, very clear. And with the recent experiences we've had with them, we see zero issues with all that.
It is EML though, right? I mean, exempt mineral land. What does that look like specifically? Are they work commitments, activity limits? What does that EML look like?
Yeah, so that exempt mineral land, well, I guess, it was called exempt mineral land at the time because nobody could touch it because the government held it. Now we own it, Galloper Gold has it. So there are work commitments that we have to commit on that. It's a work in progress and there are terms and conditions that make it very, very flexible. So we are always constantly in communication with the government to ensure that we are meeting the right timelines and the right terms to complete the work that is required. Now, that was awarded to us just in July of this past year, and the government understands that, we needed to wait for that to be able to take this forward because that's where the 43-101 was. So it does give you a good basis to work with. So they've been very, very good to work with. Bottom line, long story short, the government wants to see a mine built on that property several years down the road, and we fully agree with that.
Hmm. So that's where I want to go with this. Like, does that influence any potential mining scenarios? And I understand that you're not close to having to worry about that, but a potential buyer might. So, what is the effect of all that to a potential mining operation down the road? Isn't it? Does it make permitting harder in any way? Does it make it easier? Is it just the same? Yeah. What are the implications?
I can't say it makes it harder. I'm not sure I can say it makes it easier, but it definitely does make it attractive when the government is also promoting the fact that they do see a potential mine on Glover Island on this specific asset because they are also convinced that the property hosts a multi-million ounce resource potentially. So it does that, definitely make it a lot more attractive for any investor and or us really to try to push the project forward because, you are not fighting a battle against somebody who's not convinced that you're doing the right thing. You are working with somebody, in this case, the government, who is convinced that you're on the right path, the same path that they have chosen for the property.
Right. Yeah. Well, look, I've tried going through some of the risks and the challenges off the top of my head. Again, plenty of geological stuff to talk about in our next conversation, probably. What are other investors telling you when you go and talk to them about Galloper Gold or potential investors? What's the most fair criticism that you've received since you started running the company?
Well, there's a consensus among the investors that I have talked to that we definitely are on the right path, and we have taken the right approach where we took 1 full year to fix the company up, fix the shareholders structure, the share structure, put the right board in place, put the right management team in place, vet out some of the people that we felt couldn't be part of the organization for various reasons. So we've received a lot of encouragement from shareholders who have been shareholders of the company for a couple of years, and the new investors that I just met with over the last month and explained the situation to them. So we've received a lot of positive feedback from everybody. Everybody I have talked to in the last month and a half, specifically during the most recent raise, loves the story. And I've told them exactly what I just told you today. Sometimes a little more detail, sometimes maybe less, but pretty much the same story. They love the approach. They love the concept. They love the idea. They love the potential. They understand the situation we are in. We're microcap, so when you're in a microcap situation, you're always at risk until you get it out of being a microcap. I'm going to be honest with everybody and say I do have one shareholder who wasn't happy with me because he didn't like the fact that I did this raise at 6 cents. But listen, I have 3 kids and they're not always happy with me, right? Sometimes 2 of them are happy with my decision and the third one is not too happy. So that's just the way life is.
That's fair, and again, there's more to talk about. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of stuff, but that means that there's just so much more to talk about in a future conversation. What's your most fair criticism of me? What did you come here hoping to talk about that I failed to bring up?
Well, I mean, I've been following your work for a while now. I guess for about a year, I've been following your
Thanks.
interviews and what you do, and I always find them insightful. And the ones I really, really find insightful, I actually share with my friends. I send them the link for them to watch and then give me feedback because some of the interviews that I've heard is they pertain to companies our size and or, a little bigger, a little smaller, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of insight there. One of the reasons I wanted to do the interview was because I found the other interviews insightful. So my hope is that, other CEOs or other executives or other listeners listening to our interview find today's interview insightful, and it helps them with something because some of the other interviews you've done with others have helped me in some of the stuff I have done.
Thanks so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. And I am looking forward to future conversations. And for people listening, let me know what I'm forgetting to ask because I will ask it in our next conversation. For now, though, Harach, I'll let you do your thing. And thank you so much for stopping by.
Antonio, thank you so much. I appreciate this.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they're necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias. Again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should, under no circumstances, be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. Oh, so unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."